One evening, he was singing by a riverside, and moments later, he vanished beneath the water. What really happened in the final days of Jeff Buckley, the singer whose voice captivated the world, health, and mental state? Despite the burnout, Jeff Buckley was not a man on the brink of collapse. In fact, those close to him say he was seeking balance. In Memphis, he led a relatively low-key life, renting a small house, playing unannounced gigs at a local dive bar, and slowly demoing new songs on a 4-track recorder in his living room. Witnesses say these intimate bar performances were like going back to his roots, just Jeff and a guitar, testing out fresh, experimental material on a surprise crowd of maybe 30 locals. At times, die-hard fans would show up expecting his old hits and shout for grace, but Jeff cheekily made them wait until he'd finished his new songs. Only then would he grin and launch into the favorites everyone knew. This return to small clubs and genuine interaction hinted that Jeff was healing from the stress of stardom. As his guitarist Michael Tighe noted, there was kind of a safe feeling when he moved to Memphis, as if Jeff had finally found breathing room away from the spotlight. Yet, Jeff's inner circle did notice some odd behavior in the weeks leading up to his death. It was as if he sensed big changes coming. Friends later described a few uncharacteristic actions during his final months. Impulsive plans. Jeff tried to buy a house in Memphis that wasn't even for sale, and even attempted to purchase a car that also wasn't listed for sale. He was practically knocking on strangers' doors with wild offers, determined to put down new roots overnight. Love and commitment. He proposed marriage to his girlfriend, musician Joan Wasser, seemingly out of the blue. Amazingly, Joan later revealed that Jeff had casually told her, "You know I'm going to die young," a chilling premonition he had shared just days before the end. Unusual aspirations. Jeff even applied for a volunteer job as a butterfly keeper at the Memphis Zoo. For a rising rock star, it might seem bizarre to want a gig feeding butterflies, but those close to him saw it as Jeff craving a sense of normalcy and tranquility. Despite these quirky incidents, there were no blatant signs that Jeff was in serious trouble. He wasn't abusing drugs or alcohol. In fact, an autopsy would later confirm he had no substances in his system at all. Relationships and inner circle. During this time, Jeff leaned on a small inner circle. His mother, Mary Guibert, remained his anchor, while his girlfriend Joan Wasser, whom he proposed to in 1997, shared plans for a future together. Friends like Rebecca Moore and fellow musicians kept close, understanding the pressures fame put on him. In Memphis, his main companions were roadie Keith Foti and, soon, his bandmates Michael Tighe, Mick Grandal, and Parker Kindred. When Jeff phoned them to join him, he sounded giddy, excited for the experimental new album he joked might lose some fans. Manager Dave Laurie, though, noticed erratic behavior, but hoped it was pre-recording nerves. Just days before tragedy, Jeff called drummer Parker Kindred out of the blue, simply saying, "I love you, man." To those who loved him, it felt like a tender farewell, though none realized it at the time. Events in the final days. By the end of May 1997, everything seemed to be coming together for Jeff Buckley. The band's arrival was set for May 29th, and Memphis had started to feel like home. Jeff was living quietly in a little house filled with his musical gear and notebooks. He'd spend afternoons tinkering with new chord progressions or sanding the hardwood floors by hand. A almost meditative hobby he took up, joking that he was sanding away the glossy veneer of his past to reveal something raw and real underneath. On the nights of his weekly gig at Barrister's Bar, he would pour out his new songs to the small crowd, then mingle a bit. Locals found him humble and kind. He was no tortured diva hiding away, but rather an approachable artist enjoying a semi-normal life. May the 29th, 1997 was a Thursday, and it promised to be an exciting day. Jeff's bandmates flew into Memphis that evening, eager to reunite and start jamming in a rented rehearsal space nearby. Jeff spent the morning taking care of errands. That's when he visited a bank about a mortgage and gave himself a quick haircut, perhaps wanting to look sharp for his friends. As evening approached, Jeff and Keith Foti loaded some gear into a van and set out to meet the band for a rehearsal. However, being new to Memphis, they had trouble finding the address of the rented studio. After driving around a bit, they decided to take a short break. It was a warm, muggy night on the Mississippi River, about 80 degrees Fahrenheit and very humid even after sunset. The two pulled over near the Wolf River Harbor, a quiet channel of the Mississippi, just to relax for a moment before regrouping. What happened next has become the stuff of tragic rock folklore. As they parked by the riverbank, Jeff was in a light-hearted mood. He had a boombox with him, and the classic Led Zeppelin song, Whole Lotta Love, was playing on it. Feeling playful, Jeff began wading into the muddy river, fully clothed, still wearing his jeans, boots, and shirt. He laughed and belted out the chorus of the song, using the night sky as his audience. Keith Fody stayed on the shore, keeping an eye on their portable radio and guitar. At one point, Fody noticed the water creeping toward the boombox, so he turned away briefly to move it further up the bank. In that fleeting few seconds, a passing boat sent a sudden wake toward the shore. Fody turned back, and Jeff was gone. The wake had swept over Jeff and pulled him into the dark water. One moment, Jeff was floating and singing. The next moment, only silence and ripples remained. It was approximately 9 p.m. when Jeff Buckley disappeared beneath the Mississippi's currents. The final day. Keith Fody frantically scanned the black water, shouting Jeff's name, but there was no sign of him. Panicked, Fody called 911 and also reached out to the band members who had just arrived in town. The joyful reunion they expected that night instantly turned into a nightmare. Search teams arrived quickly and combed the river with boats and flashlights late into the night. As news spread through Memphis, hopes remained that Jeff might have somehow climbed out downstream or was clinging to a tree branch, waiting to be rescued. His band and friends gathered at Jeff's little house, holding on to each other in shock. Before the night was through, we all felt that he was gone, Michael Tighe said of those tense hours. Still, they waited and prayed for a miracle. For 6 days, Jeff Buckley was missing. The police and Coast Guard continued to search the Wolf River Harbor and the wide Mississippi, but nothing turned up immediately. Those days were agonizing for his loved ones. The band camped out in Jeff's home, surrounded by his guitars, lyrics scribbled on notepads, and the half-finished demo tapes of the songs he'd been crafting. They played his music and told stories, vacillating between laughter and tears. Jeff's mother, Mary, flew down to join them. Fans in New York held candlelight vigils outside Cine, the cafe where Jeff had started his career, refusing to give up hope. On June 1st, 1997, at a U2 concert in New Jersey, Bono paused during the show to lead the crowd in a prayer for Jeff's safety. A poignant tribute from one superstar to another. The world was holding its breath for Jeff Buckley. On June 4th, 1997, hope turned to heartbreak. That afternoon, passengers on a riverboat called the American Queen spotted a body floating in the Mississippi, not far from Beale Street in downtown Memphis. Authorities were alerted, and the body was retrieved. It was Jeff. He was finally found 6 days after he vanished, just a few miles downstream from where he'd gone swimming. He was only 30 years old, just shy of his 31st birthday. His road manager, Gene Bowen, had the grim duty of identifying Jeff's body. The Shelby County Medical Examiner soon announced that Jeff Buckley had died by accidental drowning. There was no alcohol or drugs in his system, and no signs of foul play at all. The river's unpredictable currents and undertow were the culprits. It appeared Jeff was simply caught off guard by that boat's wake and pulled under before he could react. The tragic news spread rapidly. The golden voice behind Hallelujah was silenced in a freak accident. Public shock and reaction. The confirmation of Jeff Buckley's death sent shockwaves through the music world and his fan base. Tributes poured in from fellow musicians and listeners around the globe. Many struggled to make sense of how such a vibrant young artist could be here one moment and gone the next. In the absence of immediate answers, some media outlets and fans speculated wildly. Was it a suicide? A publicity stunt gone wrong? Those who knew Jeff bristled at these rumors. Yes, Jeff had been acting a bit strangely before that night. And yes, the scene of his death was bizarre, wading fully clothed into a dirty river, singing into the darkness. But the evidence was clear that this was not a deliberate act of self-harm. Jeff had been in good spirits and looking to the future, not withdrawing from it. People tried to paint Jeff as this dark, self-destructive artist, guitarist Michael Tighe noted. But actually, right before his death, he was having amazing realizations about how he wanted to live. In other words, Jeff Buckley was embracing life, not running from it in those final days. The autopsy's findings of 0 drugs and a low blood alcohol level further quashed the rumors. This truly was an unfortunate accident. In the days following, grief and love for Jeff overshadowed any gossip. Fans held memorial gatherings, playing his music and mourning together. The Buckley family organized a memorial service in his hometown and asked that donations be made to the Memphis Zoo in lieu of flowers, a nod to Jeff's gentle spirit and his affection for that zoo. At concerts around the world, artists dedicated songs to Jeff's memory. Many remembered the emotion in his voice and the purity of his artistry. His mother Mary later remarked that the absence left by Jeff felt like a gaping hole in our collective souls, one that could only be filled by each person promising to make the world a bit better in Jeff's honor. Jeff's tragic end also prompted reflection on his father's legacy. Eerie comparisons were drawn to Tim Buckley, who had also died young, but those closest to Jeff made it clear this was not some cursed rock and roll saga or inevitable family fate. This was a heartbreaking accident that robbed the world of a once-in-a-generation talent. Legacy and aftermath. Though Jeff Buckley's life was cut short, his legacy has only grown in the years since his death. In 1998, the songs he had been working on in those final months were compiled into an album titled Sketches for My Sweetheart the Drunk, giving fans a bittersweet taste of the music Jeff was crafting. Listening to that posthumous album, one can hear Jeff's fearless experimentation and evolution as an artist, making it all the more tragic that we never got to hear those songs fully realized. Critics and friends noted how Sketches captured Jeff's state of mind in Memphis, free-spirited, daring, and full of life. Over time, Jeff's influence on music has proven deep and far-reaching. Artists like Radiohead's Tom York and Muse's Matt Bellamy have cited Buckley as an inspiration, and his genre-blending style paved the way for many singer-songwriters after him. His iconic recording of Hallelujah has become legendary, introducing countless listeners to the song, and often being considered one of the most beautiful vocal performances ever captured. If Grace was critically acclaimed in its time, it has only grown in stature since, appearing on greatest albums lists and continuing to sell to new generations of fans. Jeff Buckley is no longer just remembered as Tim Buckley's son or a tragic figure. He's remembered as a singular voice that burned bright, however briefly. His family and friends have worked to keep his memory alive in meaningful ways. Jeff's mother, determined to honor his compassionate spirit, helped establish scholarships and programs for young musicians in his name. His road crew and collaborators, with Mary's blessing, even founded a charity called the Road Recovery Foundation to help young people struggling with addiction and mental health using music as therapy, a cause Jeff deeply believed in. And remember that butterfly keeper job Jeff applied for at the Memphis Zoo? In a touching turn, Jeff's ashes were scattered at that zoo, and a plaque was placed by the tiger exhibit where he used to stand and marvel at the big cats. The zoo even named a newborn tiger cub, Jeff, in his honor. It's a quietly beautiful memorial that seems far more fitting for him than any tombstone.